Good afternoon, everyone. Rather, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Jane Cho. I'm the Director of Administration at the Aaron Copland School of Music at Queens College, and also the coordinator for the Asian American Pacific Islander celebration for Queens College this year. Queens College has always celebrated Asian American History Month in May, led by the Asian American Center. But this year feels different. Because we have experienced a pandemic, racial turmoil, and the rise of discrimination and hate crimes against Asian and Asian Americans. We have created a rich and comprehensive programming to celebrate Asian and Asian American Pacific Islander heritage this month, building solidarity and addressing the social and racial injustice in America. Tonight, we have stellar arts panel, prominent artists, arts community leaders, and students from the Aaron Copland School of Music, and we will discuss their significant contribution in the arts while addressing social and racial issues in America. Let me introduce our panelists. Emika Smith is currently an elementary music teacher at the Riverhead Charter School. Her most recent position was at Deer Park Union Free School District, where she piloted the life skill music program at Deer Park High School in 2017. She is also completing her Master of Science in Music Education degree at the Aaron Copland School of Music. Andrew Cheng is a Malaysian-born guitarist and he's completing his Master of Music in Jazz Studies at the Copland School of Music also. Andrew has toured globally, such as Taiwan, Singapore, and Germany for many different projects. He is a founding member of video series of Project 4 West Sessions. Next, we have Huang Ruo, who has been hailed by The New Yorker as one of the world's leading young composer and by New York Times for having a distinctive style. His vibrant and inventive musical voices draws equal aspiration from Chinese, ancient, and folk music, Western avant-garde, experimental, and more. As a member of the new generation of a Chinese composer, his goal is not just to mix both Western and Eastern elements, but also to create a seamless, organic integration. Huang Ro's diverse compositional works span from orchestra, chamber music, opera, theater, and dance to cross-genre, sound installation, multimedia, experiential improvisation, folk rock, and film. Next, we have a jazz composer and violinist, Meg Okura, is the recipient of the 2018 Chamber Music America New Jazz Works Program, funded by the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation. And in 2020, Copeland House Residence Award. She is founder of the Pan Asian Chamber Jazz Festival since 2006. Meg has used her music as a tool to negotiate her conflicting identity, a jazz violinist, a Japanese immigrant, Jewish by choice, and a mother of a Black Jew. And finally, we have Cathy who's a former executive director of the Jamaica Center for Arts and Learning, former executive director of the New York Chinese Culture Center, and former deputy director for the Flushing Council on the Culture and the Arts, also known as the Flushing Town Hall. She spent most of her career helping community-based organization building sustainable business model and create unique signature programs that have lasting impact in the communities they serve. So we are truly lucky to have a stellar panel this evening. So we're gonna just jump right into questions. So I would like to ask all the panelists, if you could maybe share your background and your upbringing and your cultural landscape growing up shaped you as a person and as an artist, a teacher, and arts administrator. So perhaps I can maybe ask Huang Ro to start.
Jen, thanks for having me, and it's very wonderful and also meaningful to be here speaking with all of you. Originally born and raised in China, and I immigrated to the US when I was 18 to pursue school studying, and living in this country for so many years not only shaped me as as an artist, but also as an educator. Currently, I'm teaching at the Mannes School of Music. So to me, carrying and continuing my culture from Asia, and also to able to integrate that with wherever I go to, and with new things, with new culture, is part of my composition, and also is part of my musical journey as an artist.
That's wonderful. And let's hear from Cathy.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. And it's such a pleasure to be here with this group of people to talk about my experience as a arts administrator. And I'm from Taiwan. About 27 years ago, I came to New York City to get my advanced degree for arts management. And since then, I have been indulging what New York City can offer. I consider myself a New Yorker. On the work front, my background is in classical music, and as an arts administrator, I truly embrace the opportunity that only New York City can offer and expand my presenting career to include all genres, music, dance, theater, film, multidisciplinary visual art, big festivals, small festival, public art, indoor, outdoor. And did my cultural background shape me as a person and administrator? I think the culture that I grew up in definitely shaped who I am as a person. But as an administrator, I think my classical music training has more impact on my career. It provides me a basic background and understanding of the creative process that helps me a lot as an administrator.
Thank you for that answer, Cathy. Let's go to Meg.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So I identify as a jazz composer today, but I also come from a classical background, and I'm an immigrant from Japan. I was born and raised into a very Christian, fundamental, like evangelical family. And so I'm a sort of recovering from everything. And as Jane has, introduced me, I'm a Jew by choice and a mother and all these things. Definitely, music helped me make sense of my life, and because of these conflicting identities. But today I actually use music as solace, like a place for me to go to heal me. So.
Oh, that is very healing to hear, actually. We all have a conflicting identity, I believe. So thank you for sharing that sentiment. Let's go to Emika, please.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for having me. I am half Japanese and half Puerto Rican. My father immigrated to the United States, I believe, when he was 20. And my mother she was born and raised in New York. Her grandmother came here from Puerto Rico. So there's a big joke that I grew up with a lot of rice. And we were raised, my mother raised us. I have one sister. She raised us Roman Catholic. But my dad is a practicing Buddhist. So our house was very diverse culturally and spiritually as well. I grew up here on Long Island. Currently, I live out on the East End, and I teach out here on the East End. But I did grow up in Huntington schools. I think how my background shaped me as a person is, growing up, it was a little. I guess I struggled to find my identity a little bit, because growing up there were not a lot of mixed kids in my classes. I think maybe it was just me and just a handful of other Asian students. Certainly not as mixed and unique as my background. And certainly growing up the child of an immigrant was very different than my friends whose parents who are not first generation American. So growing up, it was a little tricky trying to find my place, but I think with music, I really found, like Meg was saying, like her home in music, and it really shaped me as an educator because I currently teach children who are minorities and children of immigrants. So I really can relate to how maybe their households are and them finding their own place in this world. So yeah.
Thank you, Emika, for sharing that. I think your students are very lucky to have you. So now, Andrew, please tell us.
Hi. Yeah, thanks, Jane, again for having me. My name is Andrew Cheng. I am a Malaysian-born guitar player, born to Chinese parents. My parents are second-generation immigrants in Malaysia, and I was born on the island of Borneo, so full of rainforest. So I as well, like Meg, identify as like a jazz musician, composer at this point, though I'm still I'm still a student for sure, and I guess we're all always students of the music. But I grew up on an island without much going on in terms of Western music. But somehow one of my friends brought a Herbie Hancock record back home, and I heard it and I was thinking, wow, what is this? It's incredible. So one thing led to another. I came over to America to kind of to study and really like honor this American, African American especially, art form that I really wanted to seek out. And of course, as I'm growing now as a musician, I've been writing a lot more under the study of with people like Professor Antonio Hart, who have helped me greatly with that. And I'm trying to reconcile at this point like how I grew up, the sounds of me growing up in the rainforest, growing up with whatever Chinese music I grew up with my parents, and also the sounds I'm trying to study now.
Thank you. As I hear the backstory of all your background, and it is true, you cannot judge a book by its cover. You have such a diverse, really, rich, different background, and that's how it's amazing to listen to how all that sort of shaped up, and you as a professional and artists, administrators, and it's really fascinating to hear all that story. So thank you everyone for answering that question. So now I would like to talk about your current work. We have artists, community leaders and students also, and also at the same time leader, because you are leading many people in your own capacity as a teacher and also band leader and whatnot. So I was wondering, how do you get your inspiration when you do your creative work? So I was hoping maybe also we can start with Huang Ruo.
I should go to buy lottery today. I will win the first prize. Okay, I will start again. I think inspiration, we always have this old myth of being a creator or composer. One should live in the nature, being isolated. Like Mahler by a lake, or someone like Schubert, who will suffer so much, and then, or Beethoven, and then could write music. But I think as a modern day artist, we, how should I say, inspiration will always be important. Obviously, without inspiration, artists will no longer able to be inspired to create. However, there is a Chinese word, the two words. One is called 出世, which means you escape the world. As a lot of Buddhists, for example, or Taoists, they like to feel their last stage of their practice is to escape, to leave the world. But as an artist, I feel we should do the opposite, which is 入世, enter the world. In a way, I found and continue finding inspiration from the life we are living in, from the society we are part of, and of course, from the cultural journey I carry and I continue to live in as well. So not looking around or looking for, but looking within. That is where I find my inspiration.
That is really inspirational. Instead of looking outside, but we are a universe within ourselves. So we look into ourselves, and that comes inspiration. That is really wonderful to hear.
Right.
So moving on, I was wondering, Meg, you are classically trained, and I know you, and you're a classical musician many years ago. And then, of course, you do have the foundation as a classical violinist, but perhaps you can also talk about, your inspiration and how you work, how to just jive that classical and jazz world.
Oh, it's very difficult. So I started learning jazz because I wanted to become the best composer and best musician I could be. But when you start studying jazz, a little bit of jazz really doesn't mean anything. So I guess once I started, it's been a struggle. So I mean, it's so deep, but it's also very meaningful. So like Andrew, this is something that I'll be studying rest of my life. So
yeah, it's a progress.
Mm-hmm.
You never stop, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So Emika, as an educator, how do you find inspiration to work with those children every day?
I guess I always say, and I've learned this throughout my years in the classroom, I always say the most important thing is to build relationships with your students, because you can have this wonderful curriculum or lesson plan planned out, and in your head you could practice it and you think it's going to be wonderful, but if you don't know your students and if your students don't know you, it's not going to work. You can't teach music. I always tell new teachers that no music making until you build relationships. And so for me, I have to practice what I preach. So I find my inspiration through my kids. I need to get to know them. And I have around 300 students this year, and I really strive to make an effort at the beginning of each school year to get to know them. And yes, I've had them for the past 3 years at my current position. So, okay, but just knowing their name and remembering their name is not enough. These children are growing and they're developing, and each year that I come back to them, they're like a whole new little person. So I really get my inspiration for my work, because I am creative in my own work with education. I get that from them. What are they into? All right, and then how can I teach them music, or how can I teach what I need to teach through music? So it changes all the time, but yeah, the big answer to that question is all of my kids.
Wow, that's a really great answer. People say you learn from the students as much as you teach them. There's a saying. So I think that is indeed true. There's a truth behind that. So I'm going to move around and move ahead of ahead of the schedule. So when we do the whether it's composing a piece, planning for a project, planning for programming, what is important to you as a professional? The process when you do your creative work, because there's going to be some sort of a focus. And I was wondering if you could talk about not necessarily priority, but what is the core importance to you when you do your work? Perhaps we can start with Cathy this time.
Sure. I think it's the same reason you can call it inspiration. you can call it priority, you can call it the process. I think as the presenter, I'm looking for two things. One is that as an institution, what message I want to convey to my audience or the community. And as for artists, what kind of stage they would need to deliver their message to their audience. So whether I'm looking to have a dance festival or a children's festival or a jazz festival, what is the message behind the festival? For instance, that if I have a dance festival, is it a dance festival for emerging artists, or is it for a renowned artist? What's the scale of the festival? Is it for the community? Is it for citywide? Is it for the borough-wide? And so you look at every angle of why I'm producing this festival. And then I think about how do I bring the audience to the artist, because not oftentimes the audience is in your neighborhood. Sometimes you have to think about to bring audience from out of the borough, and who are the artists decide where the audience come from. And sometimes it's important for the organization to have certain program, but you don't have audience. Then it takes time to cultivate the audience. And so all that from the institution point of view, what is important for the institution, and to understand what's the artist's vision that need to come to the point to be able to work together. Because sometimes if it's not understanding each other, the artists come to the stage, they will be disappointed. They will think about the institution is not considering their value and presenting them to the wrong audience. So to me, that is my process, that what the message I would like to deliver, and who are my target audience, and who are the artist's message.
Yes, it's really interesting to hear the presenter's perspective. I work with a lot of artists, and we're always wondering what it is that a presenter's really focusing on, and it's really wonderful to hear that perspective. Like it's almost like a backwards in a way. So and thank you very much for this very interesting and a clear answer as well. So I was wondering, maybe we can move to Meg, as a jazz classical genre blending artist. How do you what is important to you when you do your creative work?
So I actually write music for my own pleasure, and I try not to have any kind of real agendas or big goals beyond the music, its own merit and just composition itself. And I'm not trying to fix this world with my music or anything like that. And however, I would also hope to add something to the world, and I want my music to be useful to others. But that's really lofty goal. So I think it's always it's a big challenge, because at the end of the day, it's just music. So it's a struggle, and I use actually struggles and pain as an inspiration sometimes to write music. So that's where sort of but I'm trying not to have those big huge goals, and I try not to take myself too seriously. And that's my goal. I try to just try to be more like an amateur, and really enjoy it. That's sort of my goal.
Thank you very much for this very honest answer, and very humble to hear. So Huang, could you share your priority, or what is important to you as you write music and do a project?
I think I often feel that as simple as music, which is made of sound, but the idea behind it, the meaning behind it, to me, there is a reason. So music is not just for the sake of entertainment, but in a way, it serves a function, no matter what that is. So yes, I sometimes I write music for myself, and sometimes I write music for people. But I think music, in a way, there is a reason to be created. Take an example, during the pandemic, last March, I maybe some of you also had the same feeling. I was falling into this darkness. In a way, we don't know where the future is, or what lays ahead of us. So I could not create for several weeks. I stopped what I was writing at that time, and just became kind of very numb, very low, and depressed in a way. But what helped me to come back on my footing and also come back to my creative self was actually by writing a piece of music in that sense for myself. So it became my own meditation and my own medication. It's called A Dust in Time, which is a piece that has been performed and shared around the world right now. But when I was writing it, I just thought that, this is something I got to do. So that was the case, that writing music, yes, for myself, but also because of what I went through and because of what the surrounding situation was. So as a reaction to our life. So in that case, I fulfill the meaning of that moment. So I like to think of at different stage, at different time, we create art for different reasons. So one might not able to repeat exactly the same thing, but the beauty and the meaning is whatever you created at that moment was so precious and so pure and so truthful, and one should enjoy that moment, because you might not able to go back to that moment anymore. But that is life, and we keep on going forward with our new ideas and new creations.
That was great answer. I think it's really true that music and the arts brings healing energy, especially when we go through tremendous difficulty, such as pandemic. And also, I would have to also agree with you that, you're in that moment when you create something special, and that moment never comes back, and just fully enjoying it and share
Right.
that with other people is really, really, really important. So thank you for that sentiment. So Andrew, as a student, and I mean, of course, that you wear the hat of the student, but you are a creator, you're a band leader. So when you do your creative work, what is important to you?
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about that quite a bit recently, and then I sort of came to a similar conclusion as Huang Ro. Like music is not really like just for entertainment, right? But it's great for that too, of course. But in the pandemic time, I also went through a period of, what am I gonna do? Like I can't go back home. Like I'm stuck here, sort of doing nothing. And yeah, it was very hard to do anything, to practice, to write. And I happened to be, I hate to be a shameless plug person, but in Antonio's ensemble at the time, which was meeting on Zoom at Professor Antonio Hart, and he just had the idea of giving us topics to write for every week. And he would give us like these topics that I really did not want to write for, like election or racism, or the pandemic, and every week I would have to write things, and I remember going in, why am I doing this? But then in retrospect, writing it, I realized I was just like what you said, like sort of capturing the snapshot of how I felt at the time. And I think that as musicians, or creators in general, we have this kind of we take the responsibility to kind of speak of the air of the time, the zeitgeist, right, of whatever is happening in that moment. So in the end, that was very healing for me. So I think, yeah, just writing what I'm feeling at the time, just trying to be honest, right?
Thank you for that great answer. Just being honest while you're doing your creative work speaks very loud, I think. I would like to move on and to the next question. As you know, we survived, or at least, we are surviving the pandemic, and also now because of the pandemic, there is a newfound obstacle, challenges, racial bias, attacks against Asian Americans, and also on top of that, for women, there's another layer of complications. So I was wondering, I will open to all panelists, and please speak freely, but I was hoping to perhaps ask Meg and then Emika about these issues. Maybe you can, Meg, talk about that a little bit.
So I think we Asian people have very unique challenges. There's an Asian stereotype of being humble and quiet, and also this myth of permanent foreigners, right? So I think this led to, like, in my experience, I've been living here in the States for a very long time, since 1990. So and over the the years, I mean, things have gotten better, but still, I have had the privilege of some people almost oversharing or feeling almost too comfortable with sharing things that they would not share with so-called, like, who they think more American. For instance, I've been in, I've heard, let's say, white people, using the N-word in front of me, or African American people talking about, Jewish people, and they have no idea that I'm Jewish and African American. I mean, family, and for example, as if I'm such a, like, quiet, people look at me and think I'm so quiet, so humble. So, I mean, as if I'm invisible almost. So for example, I was one time on a gig, one of the musicians whom I've never met before, he said he would love to have people like you and your husband would be a great neighbor to us in our neighborhood, because he said, how nice, right? And because he continued, he didn't want any Jewish neighbors because kids don't eat the same food. And then he also didn't want any Black neighbors because the property values will go down. So, I mean, it was a painful experience, but then that made me think, just stop and think, why? Like, why would anyone feel so comfortable to do that with a face like this? Because I don't think any person would speak so freely in front of a person who they think is full American. And that's just, and also, this whole notion of, the stereotype of Asians being humble and quiet. I try to counteract, by being assertive and speak up more, but it only backfired a lot of times because I tried to be strong. I tried to speak up, but then it actually, a lot of times when I speak up, I end up losing the gig or something. So, and I think that's because, and actually there's a study, I think at 2013, University of Toronto, I believe, about when Asian people speak up and become more assertive, we are disliked more. So this is a very unfair disadvantage for us Asian women, because, no other groups will suffer from this stereotype because they don't have this stereotype of, Asian women should be this way and that way. But when we deviate from that stereotype, it's so unfair that we are disliked more. So that's something that, that made me, stop and think. And there's, it's a unique challenge that we face, and I don't really have a solution, but, I guess my, that's funny why we work so hard, right? We work so hard to compensate. We do, things that's opposite, but there are things that I guess non-Asian people can be maybe slightly more sensitive, also, for instance, when I'm out with another Asian person and people think we're related. Like, is that your sister? Is that your brother? Or at one time I was in a cafeteria and I had my own tray, and then I was charged so much more, and I was like, what's going on? And then realized that they were charging me and two other unrelated Asian people on my bill, So, or it's like people assume that we are like all related. So I don't think that happens often to, other more American, accepted American looking groups. I think we're very unique in that we are always kind of considered, outsiders. For instance, what happened to like Christy Yamaguchi, like, winning the gold for America is not enough to be fully accepted as Americans. It's, and I want someday we don't have to work so hard to be liked, That's that. I don't know. What do you think?
You have a smile on your face and you spoke so eloquently and strongly, but there's a pain, unique pain that it's hard for, quote unquote, other white Americans might be able to comprehend. So thank you for having the courage to speak up on that matter. Emika, please share. What is your take on?
Well, I'm not quiet. If anyone who's watching knows me, I am not quiet. So I remember Meg was talking about working hard, and I remember I was 22. I had just graduated college, and I was trying to find a teaching position, and we all know how difficult that is, and was, and still currently is. And my mom, she sat me down and she said, not only are you a woman, but you're a woman of color. You're going to have to work harder than everybody else. And she said, people can take your resume and they can look at your name. And at the time I wasn't married, so I still had my maiden name is Wada. And she said they could just look at your name and go, nope. And I think I've been on literally, I think close to 100 interviews over the past 7 years. Or I should say 5 before I received my current position. And there's always, when you leave an interview and you're like, oh, I don't know if that went so well. Oh, maybe I could have answered this question this way, or maybe I could have said this. And, and then you don't hear from people and you don't hear back about the position. And then there's always, and I think we can all relate, all of us here can relate, well, that last thought in the back of your head is, oh, well, maybe they were racist. Maybe there was a little prejudice there. So I think I see everybody like kind of nodding. It's always kind of like that final thought that unfortunately us as Asians and other people of color, other minorities, we have to go about this world and navigate this world with that looming question. And it really shouldn't be that way. But unfortunately, it's still like that. I remember growing up. Now, like I said before, my mom is Hispanic, and my sister and I don't look very much like my mom. We came out looking like our dad. And I remember we would go out to eat. We would go into a restaurant and eat as a family. And as I got older, we would kind of notice people like staring and trying to figure out, oh, how are they all related to each other? Like, especially, I guess, because my mom really doesn't look like the three of us. And, oh, like, what is she doing there? Like, how are those kids related? And Meg, you said you have a mixed child too. And I can only imagine at this point, you know, but my husband is white. He's a white male, Irish, European, and everything, you know. And there have been times where we're out and I noticed, just because this was the way my life was growing up, and we got a certain look, and you know, there are certain places, situations that I won't go without him, unfortunately. And Meg was saying before, you know, we have to, you know, there are these stereotypes that we're quiet and humble, and I'm not quiet at all. I'll say it again. And we just kind of have to, I think, continue to break that, and to continue to prove people wrong. And there's this whole model minority thing. And, you know, I remember I had somebody say to me, well, why, I was in high school, why are you failing math? Aren't you Asian? I'm just, you know, and like, what was I supposed to say? I was a child, and even I think now as an adult, I wouldn't even know what to say to that. But I think we just have to keep fighting, and hopefully, maybe not for much longer, but we have to keep proving these people wrong. And I think as Asians, we kind of fall in between this like spectrum of racism a little bit. It's like Meg was saying, she's encountered people who've said racist things to her, not realizing that she herself is a minority. And I've experienced things too. And we kind of fall in this, like, we're a little invisible, I think, as a culture on this like spectrum of racism. You know, people think it's very polar and it's literally black and white, when it's really not. And we fall within that too. And I think we encounter a lot more than people think, because of the way we look, our, you know, our biological makeup, and these stereotypes that are in place.
Thank you, Emika. That is really powerful to hear. And as you talk about it, you know, it is almost a disease that the society has, and they don't even realize that there's a disease because we are all part of it. And it's not only against the Asian American Pacific Islander, it's in many cases against the Jewish people, against the Muslim people, and they sort of experience the same issues and struggles. So I think we can even start thinking about solidarity and speaking up when there is an injustice, when it's not fair. So I think that is really, really important. So it's a fight that we're going to continue to fight. So thank you very much for speaking.
If I can, Jen, if I can add
yes, please.
one more thing, you know, as a administrator, you know, my career is different than the artist that you finding the gig. You have to try to, you know, find the next, you know, places to present your work. But as an admin, that you have to go into a certain career path, and I just found it, as you climb the ladder higher and higher, the position that can really fit me, it becomes so much less and less and less. Whether the institution is like not, they don't want the Asian face, or the institution, they even the Asian cultural institution, they do not want to have an Asian face as their head. It's a very interesting conflict. You was saying that, you know, as an Asian, I understand the culture, I can presenting your culture better to the mainstream white cultural institution, but it's totally not the consideration. So I can see that it is a challenge as a presenter, as you're climbing up the ladder higher, that's really not much position is available.
I agree. I think as you you know, progress your role, and as an administrator at the leadership level, it is predominantly white controlled. So that's why I think we need to educate more of our students, and educate ourselves, educate our society. I think that's really, really important. Thank you very much for speaking that very clearly, Cathy. I would like to move on to the next question. So I think this is a question for all panelists. Could you tell us your thoughts and thinking process, creative work process against, not against, but relating to hate crimes against Asians and Asian American, and all the biases and everything that's negative against Asians and Asian Americans. So I'll just leave it up to anyone who would like to jump in.
I'll jump in.
Oh, Emika, thank you.
So like I said before, I teach a majority of minority students. Majority of my students at my current school are Black and brown, and they are a lot of them are children of immigrants. So I think, I don't think I can change the world in a week or in a month or in a school year. But I like to think that maybe I can change my own little world. And they say as a teacher, if you influence one child, then your job is done. And in addition to elementary students, I teach middle schoolers. And I have to say, my middle schoolers are some of the most amazing young people I've ever encountered. I mean, they're a little crazy because they're middle schoolers, but they say and create some of the most amazing things. And what I try to do, I try to make sure that I leave room for them to speak. And when we leave room in our lessons and in our curriculum to hear our students' voices, they really say amazing things. And so in light of all of these things happening, the hate crimes, not just against Asians, but the Black community, the Hispanic community, I think it's really important that we address it with them. Because, I remember the day after the insurrection at the Capitol, I had my middle schoolers, and there's no way that these young people are sheltered really from current events just because of social media and the technology available. So I said to myself, I was like, there's no way I can teach music without addressing this, because these events happen. I mean, the events that happen directly affect the daily lives of our students, whether you're a school teacher, you're a private teacher. So I think in my own way as an educator, it's really important to just listen and be the ears and allow, your students, and especially if you can relate to your students, let them talk about what's going on, and then you can choose to go from there, and just again, just listen and make sure that their voices are heard, because I think it starts with our young people. If we're going to really, really make strides to change our world.
I cannot agree with you more, and really listen, really intensely listen, and also support. I would like to actually bring out an interesting thought. The entire Holocaust actually studied words. They were saying Jewish people are dirty, Jewish people are not good, and then before you know it, the entire world thought. And also, if you can think of it, before administration in the United States, Kung flu and China virus, and then the hate crime against Asian Americans skyrocketed. So also, I think it's really important be mindful of, because words do matter, and also important to speak up whenever you sense any injustice, racial bias, and stuff like that. So I was wondering, either Andrew or Huang, if you have any comments about the recent hate crimes against Asian Americans, and how does it affect you?
I think that, Andrew, if you don't mind, I will just say a few things quickly. I think it does bring the reality much closer to us during the pandemic, that what anti-Asian hate does exist, and discrimination towards Asian and Asian American has existed for many years. In fact, the first and only discrimination act against one group of ethnic and race is the Chinese Exclusion Act, and that was already in 1880s. And then, of course, later on you have the insertion of the during the World War II, and then during Korea War. So whenever there is an issue, there's a war or this or that, Asians are treated as perpetual foreigners. But I think we are again in a war here as well. During the pandemic is the virus, but Asian people unfortunately have been and continue being targeted as the enemy or as the cause of the virus. But I think one should look back to the history. I often thought that, the other day I saw the news of, I think there's in Illinois or Chicago, they decided to include Asian American history as part of the public school education. That was a small news out of all the news cycles, but to me, that's a big news. And I celebrated that because in public school and also in private school in this country, this part of history have not been taught or mentioned, not even. And people are ignorant. In a way, you can totally blame them because they don't even know when Asian people came to this country. And of course, we were treated as foreigners in that sense because they don't know anything about us. And private school, I live in Bronx in New York, and there are several very expensive private schools around here, very famous, but they all teach Chinese as their exotic expertise to charge very high tuitions. All these private schools teach Chinese now. Why don't they teach Asian American histories? All the private schools, they should do that, use that as a specialty. So talking back as what artists can do as all administrators, in this case, we have to fulfill our duty now. Now, I have been writing for operas for the past 12 years, and a lot of subjects I'm writing, especially for the past 5 to 6 years, has a cause that I want our voice to be heard. For example, with an American Soldier, which is an opera I wrote based on the true life story of Private Danny Cheng, whose story was finally known, but he was hazed to death in that sense due to racism and discrimination against Asian American. So as artists, we create operas, we create artworks that people come to see it, they learn something out of that. Otherwise, no one would heard about that or know about what happened to Danny Cheng. And from that, no one even know about, there is racism towards Asian people. So little or more we can do, we are doing it. And I want to make a call out to more Asian American artists and Asian artists to do more for this front. Any subject, anything we can do. Yes, we can create art as entertainment, but now it's more urgent, more than ever. So we need to create art that matters and relevant to who we are.
Cannot agree with you more, Huang Ro. To educate and raise our voices and let other people know. And I would like to move our conversation and segue to what we can do as an artist and musicians to solve this problem, and hopefully we'll be able to contribute to become a part of the solution. So Andrew, you had some good thoughts when you and I actually were talking about it. So would you like to share some of your thoughts?
Well, I hope I remember them. But I mean, I can speak from perspective of a student, right? I like what Emika shared in the way that if you affect the world around you, right, you influence those people who will go in turn to influence other people. So like with regards to my own world, I feel like I have my own like racial biases. It's like if we're all being like, honest. We all have. I guess I'm a little younger, so you guys probably had more time to work on that stuff. But like for example, against other minorities, like I remember when I came here, you know, your parents kind of instill that in you if you're in another country, like, you know, how like black people commit more crime or things like that. And I remember coming here, and for me it was very hard, you know, for to meet or like kind of engage in the culture of other minorities. And I think that's causing a big divide. I can only speak to my own story, story, of course, but I think that among the student body, at least, you know, minorities kind of hang out among themselves, and we don't really do much cultural exchange. Of course, it's not everybody, but I think it would be great if Asians kind of like reach out to other minorities, and we kind of talk. I can talk about like the jazz world, you know, like I came here to study this Black American art form, right? And I respect it, like, you know, how you call Chinese music as a generalization. Like jazz music definitely is a Black American art form. So of course when I try to do it, there's some biases in the, not biases, some safeguarding, of course, in the black community, because it is their art form, and people have tried to take that art form. You know, if you look at Louis Armstrong all the way to now, people have tried to take that, right? And I think that I just have to, or we just have to, as students for now, like kind of open up and try to show that we respect this art form, and we could have more conversations about that, you know, between minorities, to try to do that. Because I feel like now, like what Huang Ruo says, there's a war, right? And the more divided the country is, the harder it is to kind of heal from that. So that's some perspective. I don't want to speak too much. Like I know, Meg, you're married to Sam, so he's a black Jew, right? So
or Jewish. Just my daughter
yes.
is a black Jew, and I'm
Right. Yes.
Anyways,
yes.
but he's he's pretty much in a Jewish community as well. But we talk, he and I speak often about how jazz is almost like solution to for harmony, because in jazz we respect each other as soloists, like in the combos, each person is just as important, and we let the soloist shine. When you accompany, you try to elevate the soloist. So like in jazz, this is possible, so and also we are embracing tradition, right? African American tradition, while creating something new. So there's like a lot of beauty in jazz, and jazz practice, performance of jazz. So I would love to use jazz to promote harmony, because there's a lot. And also it's great that we are, this is a really great way to really celebrate and show respect for African American and American treasure. This art form is truly American treasure, and it's loved by whole entire universe, right? So this is the best way, in a way, and so it's really tragic. There was this hate crime against a jazz pianist, a Japanese jazz pianist, right around the corner from here, and they were saying those racial slurs toward him, while he is the one who's dedicated his life, to studying jazz, this American treasure. And this happened right around the corner from Duke, where Duke Ellington made his music, Billy Strayhorn, this Harlem neighborhood. It's very, very, very sad. And I think education also is a huge part. I think we should really and learn, like Juan Ro, like learn history of jazz and Asian history. And then my daughter is in a very elite private school, and they are learning about Angel Island right now. And so some schools are really trying very hard because of what's going on. So I hear a lot about the history, and I'm learning it myself too. And I have discovered, even though I'm an immigrant myself, my great grandfather used to work in Oakland, California, and he was turned back. I guess he had to go back. So, but 4 generations later, I'm here. So anyway, sorry, I
cannot agree with you more, Meg and Andrew. So we are actually over time, but I would love to give everyone a quickly wrap up, both all Emika and Cathy and Huang. So 20 seconds each, and we will close.
Well, I just want to quickly add something to what we were discussed is, we all know that classical music, when you do the audition, that you are behind the curtain, right? You judge the music, you don't judge by the persons who they are. And I wish one day that we have a platform, the stage, that we can really just not look at you with your color skin, your face, but really truly appreciate the beauty of the arts that perform on stage.
Emika?
Meg said it. It starts with education. And because we're musicians and teachers here, it starts with music education, the curriculum. We can't just stick to the Western European, all these old white guys, when there was great music being made at the same time in the United States as well. We'll teach Bach, we'll teach Beethoven, but we also have to amplify the women that were also creating music, and the minorities. We shouldn't teach Shostakovich and not talk about Duke Ellington at the same time, so that's it.
So well said. Juan, 20 seconds, quick.
Yes, first of all, I think this will be a continuous conversation. Of course, 1 hour could not resolve all the issues or problems, and also could not showcase all the great culture of and diverse culture of Asian American has. But I do hope that be open-minded, and the world is a mosaic. It's no longer a melting pot, because we don't melt anymore. We are just individual who we are. We try to be who we are, and we want to remain that way, and the world will be colorful. And we are not colorblind, but we're colorful.
Beautiful words. Thank you. So thank you everyone for joining. I would like to say thank you to Queens College and their support for the Asian American Heritage Month, and also Professor Michael Lipsy, our chair for the Aaron Coppola School of Music, who is sponsoring this event, and also Carlos Ponce, who also helped us to navigate the technology for this evening. And special thanks to all the panelists that making time between your busy schedule. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having us, Jen, and for hosting this event.
Thank you. Okay. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.